Hey there, Sooner football fans. Parker Thune and Jesse Crittenden here of OUinsider.com. This is the OU Insider YouTube channel, and this is Quick Slants, a video series where we periodically bring you short, digestible bits of content, game previews, position battle breakdowns, analysis, all of the above and more. Today, we continue our series previewing each and every game on the 2023 slate for Oklahoma, and we arrive at Bedlam, Jesse, the matchup between the Sooners and the Oklahoma State Cowboys, their final such matchup as Big 12 conference opponents. Now, I don't know your immediate thoughts on this game, but we'll get to that in just a second. I think we obviously need to start with the question that many folks on both sides of this divide have, which is how long is it going to be until we see these two teams hit the field again after 2023?
That's the ultimate question, right? That's literally been the question since the news of OU and Texas joining the SEC broke 2 years ago. That's been the question. To me, I think it's really, really hard to say. I mean, you'd like to think it's not going to be that long, right? You'd like to think that they'll figure out a way to make even if it's just a one-off, find a way to schedule it in the non-conference in the next few years. But man, look at Texas and Texas A&M. I mean, that's a rivalry that in a lot of ways is just as heated, just as emotional as Bedlam. Those two teams have not played in the regular season since Texas A&M left the conference in 2011. It's been 12 years. I really think we're looking at something like that. So, I mean, if I'm not going to say it's never going to happen, but I think I think it could be a lot similar to Texas and Texas A&M, where it could be a decade plus before we see it again.
Who becomes the new Oklahoma State for the Sooners in the SEC? Is it Missouri? Is it Arkansas? Like, do you think that rivalry can be replaced?
No, I don't know if it can be fully replaced in the sense of the history, right, and the emotions of it. They're in-state rivals. They've played over 110 times. I don't think anything is going to feel. And I know the joke is that it's not really a rivalry because OU has won over 90 times, but it is still a heated rivalry. It's a game you look forward to every year. I don't think that's going to be the case. However, I am excited for OU to get re-engaged with Missouri after those battles in the Big 12. I think that's going to be fun. If OU and Arkansas play enough times, like if they play regularly enough, I think that could sort of take the place, but I don't know if anything's going to feel quite like Bedlam.
So as we look ahead to the Bedlam matchup, this specific one in 2023, Jesse, one of the themes that we continually see year in and year out, I mean, you can set your watch to it, Oklahoma State exceeding moderate preseason expectations. That seems to be Mike Gundy's forte, is taking a team that might not be as ostensibly talented as some of the other conference foes across the Big 12, but squeezing 8, 9, 10, sometimes more wins out of his program en route to a bowl game. That's kind of been the standard at Oklahoma State. Bowl eligible every year, whether it's the Belk Bowl or the Cotton Bowl. I mean, you see a great deal of variation there. Recently, they made the run. I mean, they came very, very close to playing for a national championship in 2011, came very, very close to playing for a college football playoff berth in 2021. But in general, what we can say about this program is that typically they've been a winning football team, regardless of how much talent on paper they have boasted across this roster. And I'm of the opinion, Jesse, and I don't know how much you agree with this, but I look at this Oklahoma State roster, and I think Mike Gundy might have to pull off one of his finest coaching jobs this fall if he's going to get Oklahoma State to a bowl, because especially with sixth-year senior and two-time transfer Alan Bowman, your projected starting quarterback, I have my questions and my concerns about Oklahoma State on the offensive side.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And Oklahoma State, I think, finished 7th in the preseason poll that came out a couple of weeks ago. Not only does that feel about right, if anything, I honestly think it might be a little optimistic with all of the departures they have, or that are no longer with the team from a season ago. And you mentioned Al Bowman, who has some experience, I guess, but you're having to replace Spencer Sanders, who was a flawed but really productive quarterback that led some good OSU offenses. I think that's a huge thing. I mean, he started the last 4 years, and Alan Bowman has played a lot of years in college football, but hasn't started a game in quite some time. And last season, the problem wasn't really the offense, it was the defense. I mean, the offense averaged over 30 points a game, but you're losing Dominic Richardson, you're losing Spencer Sanders, you're losing John Paul Richardson, you're losing Bryson Green. So I think, so to your point, I think the defense was a bigger issue last year, but if the offense can't be as good as it was last year, I genuinely think this team's in trouble. The only thing that I think is going to save this team is if the offense can be good, and I have serious doubts about that.
They do have some talent at the wide receiver position, Jesse. I feel like that needs to be noted. Jaden Bray, Norman High graduate, Talon Shetron, former Oklahoma commit, graduate of Edmond Santa Fe. Another thing that has become an Oklahoma State calling card, if you will, is the ability to identify underrated talent within state lines. Obviously, Talon Shetron doesn't really fall into that conversation. He was a top 100 player nationally, but for the most part, Oklahoma State makes their hay by finding under-recruited, undervalued players in the state of Oklahoma and developing them over the course of 3, 4, 5 years into rock solid Power 5 starters. So if there is a player on this roster similar to, I mean, let's call it like it is. It was Spencer Sanders that elevated the Pokes over Oklahoma in 2021, which ended up being Lincoln Riley's final game as Oklahoma's head coach. If there's a player that's going to elevate this team to victory in this game, who do you think it is? Because I'm not convinced it's Alan Bowman.
No, and that's and you're right to know that. I mean, there is talent on this team. I don't want to make it seem like there's no talent on either side of the ball. There is talent. The reason why I have doubts is because, like you just said, I don't have confidence that Alan Bowman is going to be able to lead an explosive offense, which diminishes, I think, some of the potential for this team to be good. Having said that, yeah, I think Brennan Presley. I mean, he was really good last year. 67 catches, over 800 yards, a couple of touchdowns. I think if OSU is going to win this game, they're going to have to find a way to score points. And I'd have to guess that the OSU blueprint this year is going to be getting the ball out of Bowman's hands, get it to their playmakers. Don't put the game in Bowman's hands. I think Brennan Presley is a guy that might be able to carry some of the weight of this offense.
We rewind to this game in 2022. Oklahoma raced out to a 28-0 lead by the end of the first quarter. Didn't score again, and to my recollection, Jesse only picked up 2 offensive first downs the remainder of that football game. Nevertheless, they picked off Spencer Sanders 4 times and really smothered Oklahoma State offensively en route to a 28-13 victory in Norman. Do you think we see something similar in 2023? Regardless of which way this game swings, you see more of a slugfest than a shootout?
I do for a lot of reasons. That's the thing. We can say all about the issues with this Oklahoma State roster. Here's the thing. Sometimes at football, it's bigger than that. This is the last Bedlam, at least probably for the foreseeable future. It's in Stillwater. Do you think that Stillwater crowd, you think that crowd at Boone Pickens Stadium is going to be riled up and as loud and rowdy as we've ever heard them? I think so. I think that crowd's going to have an impact. I absolutely think Oklahoma State can win this game. Now, they shouldn't. This is a game Oklahoma should win. However, I think if Oklahoma State is going to be competitive and make this a close game, I think it's got to be a gross, slow, mucked up game, kind of like last year's was. And I do expect that this year. I just think even from a talent standpoint, OU has more talent, but I think this game is just going to be so emotional and really loud and all that stuff. I think it's going to be I think it's going to be a hard game to watch, but competitive.
And the way I see it, Jesse, one thing Oklahoma did well in this game in 2022 that they really did not do well for the remainder of the season is they were able to control the pace of the game for the most part. They didn't control the clock as well as they had the opportunity to. Again, only 2 first downs post first quarter, but Oklahoma State was kind of having to play Oklahoma's game throughout the entirety of that contest. And I think you're going to be looking at a similar battle in 2023. No, Oklahoma State is probably not a team you run away from. They're too well coached in my mind. Let's give Mike Gundy his due. He has squeezed the most out of that Oklahoma State football program for darn near 2 decades. So I don't think this is a team that you blow the doors off. But if you can continually wear them down more and more and more over the course of 4 quarters, this is a program that's going to succumb at some point and won't have enough firepower to return fire, as it were. But let me ask you, who do you think wins this game and why?
I mean, I think Oklahoma wins the game simply because they're going to have the talent advantage on both sides of the ball. As disappointing as last season was for Oklahoma, I honestly think last year's Bedlam was a pretty good testament, and I think a good indicator of how this year's game is going to go. And last year's game was simply because OU had more talent, and I think that's really what it came down to. I expect this to be a close game. I expect it to be an ugly game. I expect it to be one of the most emotional bedlams maybe ever. I think that Stillwater crowd is going to be awesome, but I think OU is going to win this game and I think mostly because that's the thing. You can talk about all the storylines with Bedlam itself, but this is a November game, and if OU is hoping to compete for a Big 12 title and maybe more, these are the type of games they've got to win. I expect OU to be in more of a position, for the postseason than Oklahoma State, and I think that and the talent advantage gives OU the win.
I agree 100% with you. I think this is a game that Oklahoma should win, and I don't think you have to look much further than the discrepancy in talent at the quarterback position. I mean, not to beat a dead horse, but quarterback is the most important position on the football field. And Oklahoma State beat Oklahoma in 2021 because they got stellar quarterback play that day from Spencer Sanders. In 2023, I don't know if Alan Bowman is going to be able to give you what you need to elevate the Cowboys past Dylan Gabriel and the Sooners. So, yeah, again, I'm with you. I like Oklahoma in this game, and I think in very fitting fashion, the Sooners conclude the conference iteration of the Bedlam series on top. But with that, we turn the page from Oklahoma State to West Virginia. That's the next game, game 10 on Oklahoma's schedule. And we'll be back next week to break down that contest between the Sooners and the Mountaineers, who toppled Oklahoma for the first time in their era as a Big 12 program last season up in Morgantown. Can the Sooners get the better of Neil Brown and West Virginia this time around? I'm sure many Sooner fans would hope so. But we'll be back next week to dive into that matchup in great detail. For Jesse Crittenden, I am Parker Thune. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and we'll see you again soon.